Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Logan County, as Walter Lebegue used to say, and all the ships at sea. All the activity in Logan County is now stopped. Everybody's rushing to their radios, turning up the volume to hear that highly rated program, Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspective.
What'd you have for breakfast that you got so puffed up?
Well, just thought we'd start the day out. Oh, I should also mention that this program is hosted by the two of the oldest talk show hosts in captivity. And why don't we start with Viewpoint, with kudos this morning?
Please and thank you.
Okay, well, I just happened to pick up the paper this morning before I came to work. And this is work, because, you know, I have to prepare for these things and all. So it's a lot of work anyway. I noted the Lincoln College women's basketball team. We have an organization, the National Junior College Athletic Association. National.
Yes.
I want to emphasize that.
I got that.
And the Women's Basketball Coaches Association of that group has, they annually vote on colleges for academic honors. Not only these kids get out there and play the ball and bounce it up and down and shoot it through that net, they also have to go to class, you know. And so, for the sixth time now, our girls were sixth in the nation for all academic.
No kidding.
Yes. So,
wow,
kudos to them. And I noted in particular one, Emily Johnson, one of our own girls. She made the academic all-star list with a 4-point GPA. So, kudos to that young lady.
Well, she's just not another pretty face, is she?
No, or another athlete. So,
wow.
Well, I really kind of mention that because people kind of lose track of the fact that these kids do more than just get out on the academic or on the gridiron or the baseball court or the baseball field or the basketball court. They have to go to school. Although, when I was a kid over at the University of Illinois, and we had a 1 o'clock political science class, met on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we had 3 big-time football players over there. I didn't see them very often during the football season.
Yeah, really.
I.e., they didn't go to class. Why don't you introduce our guest this morning? He's made a long trip up here. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to do that because he's a very nice man, but may I say, too.
Well, wait till I talk to Jim about this.
Okay. You want to have a little meeting here?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I'd like to thank Lincoln Community Theater, Deja Vu, all over again.
Yeah.
Because I saw the program twice this past weekend. It was good both times. It was just excellent. I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I think it's right that you bring that up again, Judith. We have a lot of talent in this area. And then going along with the fact that they have the talent, they're willing to commit the time for the rehearsals, and there are a lot of those, and then appearing forth. The 3 appearances that were well received, and I was just so tickled to see the kind of talent that come out there, and kind of brings you right up out of your seat when some of those ladies sing.
Oh, my word, yes. Yeah, excellent. And speaking of talent, our guest today is John Lebegue, and he's the Building and Safety Officer for the big city of Lincoln.
And that takes talent.
That does. And we're going to talk about little-known rules and regulations. And before we came in here, John told me that summer is his busiest time. Can you kind of enlarge upon that a bit, John?
Sure. Well, it's just like anything else. I think during the summer months, people are more active. During the winter months, they kind of think what they're going to do in the summer. And typically you'll see, roofing permits and people building decks and patios and all of a sudden deciding to do additions and things of that nature, because quite frankly, if you do an addition on a house, you want it closed up before the winter gets here.
You want to believe it.
So, typically speaking, that's when we're the busiest. This summer, with the exception of the theater project, we really don't have as much commercial going on as we had in recent years, but nonetheless, we've been real busy with what has been going on, and there is some things in the works, so I have a tendency to think we'll see even more. So.
Now, there's a fee that the homeowner pays for the permit to add a deck or replace the roofing or what have you, isn't there?
That is correct. There
is that based then on what the ultimate price is going to be of the project?
Well, there's a minimum price. If it's under $1,000 value, there's a minimum permit price of $20, and thereafter it's based on the value. There's a scale, a fee range, and that's how it's determined. It's based on the value of the work.
You know, let's, for the sake of argument, talk about the $20 fee. You know, it hardly pays you to avoid or ignore the need for a building permit if it's going to cost you $20, because if they find that you've done this project and not gotten a building permit, then there's a fine, is there not?
There can be. In some cases, if I know someone willfully did that and just tries to avoid getting a permit, then yes, there would be a fine. Sometimes you'll double the permit fee and things of that nature. With homeowners, that's not usually the case, because sometimes they just don't know. They don't know they need a permit to build a small section of fence or add onto a garage or put things in, build a deck or things of that nature. They just don't know they need a permit for that. And in those circumstances, we'll just send them a little note, come in, get the building permit for that, and we'll go from there. I take a little different stance with contractors, because contractors know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that kind of, during the weekends they'll do things and they won't get permits. And those are the type of situations that I want to really address a lot of times.
But you mentioned one thing I picked up at it. Fence. If a fellow wants to put a fence up in his backyard, that requires a permit?
That requires a permit.
Right?
Because we want to try to, as best we can, verify that the fence is on their property, and that it's not going to create not create, especially in corner lots. We got to make sure they're not going to create an obstruction at alleys so people can't see, because that's happened. I mean, someone will build a fence all the way to the corner, and you literally pull up, you go out the alley and you can't even see traffic coming, because you're supposed to notch that at the corner so that you'll have visibility when you come out of the alley. Sometimes someone will build a fence and they don't do that. And those are the circumstances of why a permit is a good thing, because I'll tell them what they can do when they come in for it.
Now, you wouldn't have to have a permit, of course, for growing whatever you grow, flowers and bushes.
No, you do not.
Corn.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you grow?
Boy, have I got a mind like a steel trap, huh? Anyway, but would there be a regulation against planting things so close to the curb and the corner that you obstruct people's vision?
There's called like a visibility corner, where you come out at a corner. You measure like 20 feet from each direction from that corner. You go to right where the corner meets, and you go 20 feet each way and draw a diagonal line, and that's kind of your line of sight that you want to maintain. And you don't want plantings in there or anything of that nature, because quite frankly, when you plant it might only be a foot or two tall. But as it grows and matures, a lot of times it can get much taller than that and can be a problem. And there's been areas of town where we'll see it, we'll just send a little note, and if it's in the right of way in the city property, then the city will just trim it.
Brings to mind hedges, Mr. Lebegue, existing hedges. They grandfathered.
That got taller.
Yes, they got taller. I know of a couple that are really a problem. Is there a regulation about those?
Well, I think from our standpoint, if it's a hedge along a front, you want to maintain it no higher than 4 feet. That's really what the ordinance states. In some cases, we've got some that, like you say, are mature, and to cut them at that point would be, you basically destroy them, because they've grown to such a height. If you cut it down to 4 feet, it's going to kill it. I think the only aspect that I look at is where we were talking about visibility at the corner. If it's at that area, they're going to have to do something, and typically you'll just cut it out at that corner.
You know, though, I think people, generally speaking, I'm being charitable here, Bill, would do this not realizing, because like I know people, I have friends who won't read the paper, won't listen to the news because it isn't happy. Well, you got that right. But they probably have no idea Look at, as you're driving in your car, how many people do you see that are talking on their cell phone? That's patently illegal in Illinois.
And very
But
dangerous.
I'm sure they aren't doing that just to get you. I think they're doing it because they have no idea we're not supposed to do that.
Well, I can't imagine anybody, in that particular instance, cell phones driving, I cannot imagine anybody not knowing that that is against the law. And notwithstanding that, it's just plain stupid because it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, but
That doesn't have to do with
You can't
Mr.
fix
Lebegue's
stupid.
presence here, but I just wanted to. If you're doing that, folks, go home and sit down in the closet.
well, tell us a little bit about the ones that get you worst in the summer, the rules and regulations, the infractions.
Oh, you use big words.
Well, I think I
make
think
them up.
the biggest issue a lot of times in the summer, and this summer especially with all the rain, has been the weeds and the grass, and you just can't keep ahead of it. I mean, you know, my own circumstance, I had trouble keeping ahead of the grass just
Yeah.
to, you know, get it mowed. And I think it's been more of a challenge this year with some of the properties with the mowing. And like every year, we have the others with the accumulation of garbage and unlicensed vehicles and things of that nature. And I think sometimes landlords just don't know what's going on their properties. And when they get a note from us saying, hey, this is going on, then they'll go, oh, wait a minute, we didn't even know that.
Yeah.
You know, in some cases, I think they need to check on their properties a little more often so that they know what's going on. You know, because then there wouldn't be those surprises.
Well, you can't. You talk about unlicensed vehicles. You can't leave something that's on wheels, a trailer or a what have you, in the street either.
Oh, you
for
can.
a period of time.
For 72 hours. The way the law is, you can have a trailer parked in one spot for 72 hours and it has to be moved. And what people will do sometimes is move it a foot.
Yeah, right.
And then they'll go another 72 hours. And that's something that the council has talked about in the past and never came to a conclusion on.
Now, it seems to me that as regards recreational equipment, for want of a better word, I can find no problem with having them park those in their driveways as far as recreational vehicles, boats and trailers and so forth. In their driveways, that doesn't seem to be a problem, does it?
Well, the ordinance does not allow it. If it's in the front yard of a property, you're not supposed to have trailers, boats and trailers and other of that type of items there. We don't see as much of it. I mean, quite frankly, I think in the last couple of years, we see less because we did enforce that very heavily a few years ago, and I think people have a better understanding that that they can't do that. And quite frankly, a lot of times it's a seasonal issue, and that's something that I brought up to change the ordinance, and it just didn't get enough support to do that. And where you allow the boats and things of that nature during the summer months when people use them, and then in the winter months they shouldn't be
like
there.
in their driveway, John?
Correct,
Excuse
in
me?
the driveway.
Oh, I
and that's something that I brought forward in the past, and it didn't get enough support, and so it just died on the vine, so to speak.
Well, I just don't find that offensive to have somebody's boat in a driveway, particularly.
Because that's not obstructing traffic or anything.
No, and I think I have a bigger concern when it's out in traffic. Having trailers and boats and things of that nature parked on the street.
Yeah.
Because literally I was returning home one night late on a Sunday night, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning because I had the soccer tournament with my youngest son, and I was coming down North Union, and literally I almost was on top of this trailer before I saw it because it had no reflectors on it. It was parked on the street. It was just like the last second I saw it and was able to just avoid it.
Oh, boy.
And I sent a note to him, and I said, if you're going to have the trailer on the street, get reflectors on it. And he did that. But I mean, it was like, how many have been hit in our streets over the years? I don't know.
But now you just happened upon that trailer. But you don't drive around town looking for people and say, aha.
He's got more important things
They're
to do.
doing that.
No, I mean, a lot of times, myself and my staff, I do have a full-time person that works with me and one part-time, and they spend the time more or less doing most of the field inspections for the code enforcement. And no, they don't do it in that fashion. I mean, if they see something that really is blatantly something that really we shouldn't have. I mean, like someone will have, a good example is someone had, they bought a large drive RV. And that you can't have parked in your driveway like that. You can if you're loading it or if you're bringing it in to work on it and things of that nature.
That's a different story.
That's a different story. But I mean, if it's sitting there for a length of time, then yeah, you're going to get a notice from us to say, yeah, it's got to be moved. But for the most part, no. I think there's bigger issues in town with the garbage and some of the other issues that we deal with that really, quite frankly, that's not all our main focus.
What would be, in your judgment, John, the most pressing issue that you experience as far as somebody not complying?
I think a lot of it is what we deal with is the rental properties. I would probably say 80% of our correspondence is dealt with rental. And I think what goes there is it's not yours. So you really, in some aspects, I think, those that are renting, for whatever reason, they don't have a pride in that property, and they just don't care. And they won't get garbage service, and they'll accumulate bags and bags of garbage behind it, and sometimes fill a garage or a shed with garbage bags. And I think that is one of the most challenging aspects of what we deal with is the rental proproperties.
Well, I mean, if it's really garbage, that's quite a health hazard, I should suspect.
It's a very large health hazard. I mean, and you'll get, you accumulate it in that fashion. I mean, you'll have more animals than you know what to do with really quick. And the smell and everything else that goes with it. And that, I think, it's been the biggest challenge since I've been here is the rental properties. And I'm working with the landlord association to try to come up with different angles to work with them. To try to improve that, whether it's getting a database of all the owners so I can just contact them quickly when we notice these things, so that we can avoid it. But I really find that's the apathy of tenants is what I think is our biggest
well,
problem.
That doesn't even make any sense. I mean, they're living there. I don't care, which means that they're paying to be there, and they're paying taxes ultimately because the landlord is charging them sufficient amount to cover the taxes that he has to pay.
Typically, yes. Yeah.
So there you are living there. I should think you'd have a vested interest in how much garbage you have in your garage.
Yeah, you would think that would be the case, but unfortunately, it really isn't a lot of times.
Well, John used the word apathy, but the problem with so many of them, it's not being apathetic to anything. They just don't particularly give a damn.
Yeah, that's
the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
As my dear friend Harold Trapp used to say, verbatim quote, by and large, people are just no damn good. So those people fall under that category, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do have that certain segment that do fall under that category, and, that's the challenge.
Yeah, note to our legal staff, we didn't mention anybody's name, so we're all right there.
Good. Oh, we're covered. Good. Well, then, if there is summer, surely there will be winter. What are the big winter problems, and what are a homeowner's or the person who lived there? What's their responsibility as far as snow removal is at their home?
Well, the responsibility with the winter, I mean, we still have the garbage issues in the winter. That kind of a year-round.
Doesn't smell so bad, though.
Yeah, that's kind of a year-round. That's kind of a year-round thing. It's never going to go away.
You're right.
But I think the other issue with the snow, I think the only issues we really have with that is pushing the snow in the street or things of that nature. And every once in a while we have that issue, but not that often. Quite frankly, we've had some heavy snows over the last couple of years, and there just wasn't any place to put it. When you start looking at where you're going to put the snow, and really you're responsible to clean your driveway and things of that nature. And I mean, that's kind of what goes in hand with being a property owner or a tenant.
And speaking of responsibilities, Viewpoint has some responsibility, and the station WLCN responsibilities to our sponsors. And Mr. Ash will now wheel his way into the right keys. Right back live in the studios here at WLCN. The program is Viewpoint. Our guest this morning is Mr. John Lebegue. John has a great responsibility as far as people wanting to do things, build and remodel and so forth. We have to talk to the city about that. We just get permission to go in there and do what we want to. 648-5510. Somebody might have some questions of Mr. Lebegue, and I do right now. How many chickens can we keep in our house, John?
Well, according to our local ordinance, the chickens are not allowed to be kept within the city limits of Lincoln. That's been an ordinance for a number of years. It was reiterated more like when we redid that section of the code. Recently, we added a great number of other animals to that list. But chickens are something that are not allowed to be kept within the city.
Rabbits?
Rabbits are allowed. Rabbits
Well,
are
they're kind of innocuous.
Dogs?
You're allowed to have 4 dogs, and if you have more than 4 dogs, you have to have a special license to keep more than 4
You have
dogs.
to have a
Like
psychiatrist.
if you breed dogs, for instance,
Correct.
would that be it?
Yes, that's what they would have a special license for that.
I got a dog. Bill's got a dog. John. Jim's got a dog.
That's Jim Ash.
Every people. I've only known him for 50 years. We on our block, everybody has dogs. I swear.
Yeah.
And what are the rules and regulations involving dogs, other than if you have more than 4?
Well, with the dogs, I mean, I think the biggest issue is the barking. I mean, if you have a dog, you can't have it out and creating a nuisance with the barking and things of that nature. If you have a dog, you also have to make sure that you keep the property clean.
Yeah.
I found that firsthand what that's like now that I take care of 2 dogs.
Yes.
I never really realized how much can accumulate and how fast, let me tell you.
That's right. Well, you buy a pooper scooper.
Yeah, in my case, a large one.
Who don't care. There are some people who have dogs. Damn people that put them on chains and leave them there. That's another story. There ought to be a national law against that. But seriously, there's a lot of dog waste, and a lot of people say they just don't care and they just let it accumulate.
Yeah, we do have that circumstance, and my office deals with that as well. There's a section of the code that says if you have, and it talks about that. I mean, if you have an animal, you have to clean up your private and public property. So if you take it out for a walk, you're required to pick it up.
Well, yeah.
I
mean, duh.
I didn't realize that it was a requirement to
Yes,
pick
it
it
is a
up
requirement.
in your yard.
Yes,
I'll
it is.
remember that when Murphy comes over into my yard, Mrs. Busby.
Nail him. Nail him. Yeah, Murphy did get turned in once for barking. He's a barking type dog. He's
There's
not
a law
out.
against that.
Yeah, there is. But he just goes out to piddle, pardon me, and then he's right back in the house. But he'll bark if somebody's going by when he's outside. I admit that. I don't know what you do about that.
He barks at me and I take him for a walk, for gosh
I
sake.
know. You're his best friend.
Well,
What do you do about a dog?
Well, I think a lot of times it isn't so much that, like what you're talking about. I mean, dogs are going to do that. That's their job. And, I think where you leave the dog out and it barks just incessantly for hours and hours and hours. And I think in those are the circumstances, especially at night. Last night there was someone with a dog out in the neighborhood where I live, and it was 10:30 or whatever, and this dog was just barking and barking and barking, and finally they let it in the house and it stopped. But it's like those are the circumstances where I think the police will get a phone call from someone and say, hey, there's a dog.
Yeah.
And they will be issued a citation from the police for a nuisance. So
Now, John, let me ask you a question about what you're talking about, permits to build and so forth. What if somebody buys a freestanding shed from a big box store or right here at Lincoln? Do they require a permit to bring that on, put it on their property?
yes, it does.
Oh.
And really one of the biggest reasons why that is so that we can verify where the shed is going, so that it's in the right spot. So you don't want to
So
have
it
it.
doesn't
It can't be
obstruct?
located in a front yard. It has to be located
Well.
at least 3 feet from a property line, so that you have a little space between that and the neighboring property. So from a zoning perspective, it's an important thing for us to know where it is, and also we need to know how much is on a lot, because you're allowed to cover 50% of your lot with buildings. In some cases, some of these properties are pretty close to that 50% limit.
You're allowed, if you have a regular conventional building site, you're allowed to cover that up to 50%
with
a structure.
buildings, with structures. That's correct.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Getting back to the building permits.
Excuse me.
If you are working on the interior of your house. Do you need a permit for that as well?
Well, it depends on the level of what you're doing. A lot of times, if someone is putting in new flooring and cabinets and things of that nature, if you're replacing existing things of that nature, no, I would not require a permit. If you're gutting, if say you take all the walls down, all the plaster or drywall and ceilings and things of that nature, that's a major renovation, and there you will require a permit because you're going to want to see what's underneath all that. Because sometimes, you know, you just don't know what's under there.
That permit is based on the potential scope of the cost?
Correct. It would be a scope of the cost. And then if a homeowner's doing it itself, all it is just a material cost. So it would not be any, I mean, typically when you do a project otherwise, is based on the value of the project, whereas if it's a homeowner doing it himself, it's just a material cost is what the permit would be based on. So that's a lesser cost right there from that standpoint. And I think really what the issue is what why you would want a permit, because you want to make sure that it's done correctly. Unfortunately, I've been in some homes where we had some individuals who thought they were electricians, and they weren't.
Yeah, right.
Clearly. And what they created was a severe fire hazard with what they did. They were ungrounded systems. They had open boxes. They had things of that nature hooking into the existing knob and tube with it. And it just, those are the type of circumstances where you need someone to look at it and say, hey, let's get it right.
Well, you want that for your own protection, I would suspect.
Not only your protection, but in some circumstances, you'll have individuals buy a house, do a lot of work on it, and try to flip it. So someone else is going to inherit this, and they might not know anything what's under those walls.
Sure.
And you know, in my own circumstance, I have a 115-year-old farmhouse up in LaGrange, Illinois, and when I renovated the kitchen, I tore down the suspended ceiling, and they had wires just hanging up there, and they were just bundled together and taped. They weren't even in a box. And then the joist stopped 4 feet from the end, and then they cobbled them on to the end because they didn't have a long enough joist when they built the house. So these are the type of circumstances. I mean, that was kind of an extreme, but nonetheless, those are type of some of the situations you run into. And there's times where I've seen a remodeler who bought a house. He just didn't want to do anything right with the plumbing, and he had whole unvented systems. You didn't even have vented toilets or sinks. So you had, you know, the sewer gas backing up into the house and things of that nature.
That'd be nasty.
Which points to the reason for rules and regulations. It doesn't matter if we just want to control things for people. It's for the common good, particularly their own good, insofar as regulations are concerned and conforming to code. It just seems that people think, well, I'm not going to have to do that because I have my rights. Well, that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, but so many people forget that for every right you have responsibilities on the other hand, you know?
Well, and really the codes are established for what you're more or less saying. They're to protect the life, health, and welfare of the community. It isn't just, like you say, having control over what's going on. That's really not our intent. You know, really what we want to make sure is it is done in a safe manner, because it's not just you that may be, you know, experiencing it. Someone else is going to more than likely own that property, and you know, it's gonna be a legacy of that home.
Now, with downtown or business areas in the entire business area, if somebody wants to, there are different ways you can approach the front. You can totally renovate the facade, or perhaps just paint. And tell the listeners about what kind of regulations are involved in renovating buildings downtown.
Well, now that the downtown is now part of a historical district, any exterior renovations and such, painting and awnings and facade renovations would also be reviewed now by the Historical Preservation Commission prior to me issuing a building permit. So that's a kind of an extra regulation that didn't exist prior. Prior to that, quite frankly, it's just they would come in with a plan showing what they want to do, especially for the exterior, to show how it's going to be done, make sure that the exiting is correct, because there were some doors in the downtown that opened the wrong direction and didn't open all the way, and And between myself and the fire department, we've more or less corrected all of those over a period of time. So we don't have that circumstance anymore. But now, I mean, with the interior, you know, they do have to have plans and things of that nature when they do large interior renovations. And we've had a few over the years. We've had the rent-to-own. They did a large renovation in there, and David Lanterman had done the By the Bean, and we've seen a number of others, and I hope we see more
good things. He's done some remarkably good things downtown.
Yeah, it's been in some way we're starting to see a little bit of a renaissance down there, and I think hopefully it'll continue in that circumstance.
What if you get into a project and run into asbestos? I know when the schools were doing some work a few years ago, they had an awfully expensive project with asbestos. What about homeowners, and what about store owners downtown? Well,
the homeowners, there's kind of a with the IEPA, they don't require them to handle it. I mean, but a lot of times it will be discovered, like during a home inspection. When you go to sell a house, sometimes an inspector will come through that house and they'll find it wrapped on pipes. I know for a fact the house that I currently live in, the pipes in the basement, the heat pipes are wrapped in asbestos. And quite frankly, it's perfectly safe as it's sitting there. It's when you disturb it and pull it off and things and release the fibers is when it becomes an issue.
Well, what if you decided to get a new furnace that would affect those heat pipes that are wrapped in asbestos?
Then in those circumstances, you really would, the best avenue would be to hire an environmental firm that specializes in the removal of asbestos, and unfortunately that can be a very costly endeavor. And you know, in commercial, it's a requirement. I mean, it's just something they have to do. I mean, if it's discovered, it has to be either encapsulated or not disturbed. And if it is disturbed, it has to be removed.
But to me, an old timer, it just seems very onerous and unfair. Let's say, Judy, you buy a new furnace and you have insulated pipes, the hot water system. And they only have a few inches to change that, you know, from the new to the old.
They wouldn't have to do anything in that circumstance.
You know, that would just seem so impractical to have to.
I think what she was mentioning earlier, say you, a good example, say you go from a hot water system to a forced air. And you got all the pipes are wrapped in asbestos. That would be a circumstance where some people just leave the pipes because they don't want to deal with taking the asbestos off. I've personally taken asbestos off in my own home, you know, because I knew what I had to do. I had the suits, I had the breathing apparatus and all the things because I've done it. I've done those type of jobs. I know what it entails. And, you know, and a lot of them, they just don't realize it's even there. I mean, they don't. I mean, because of the age of some of these homes, you really don't know what's in some of them.
In 1946, we put a new Kewanee Junior boiler, 20 horsepower boiler, in my place down at on the Chicago Street, and I personally wrapped that thing in asbestos and chicken wire. I didn't have any mask or anything. I'm all right though.
Oh heck. Oh heck. Hey, I'd like to go back to that snow business one time. I'm going to tell you something I heard that I kind of believed, and you can either debunk it or you can validate it. Somebody told me once that if you don't clean your sidewalk, then nature put that snow there so you're not liable if somebody falls and breaks their leg. But if you do clean your sidewalk, then it's your fault that it's slick.
I really don't have an answer for that. I've heard the same thing.
We've stumped him.
I've heard the same exact thing. You know, whether it was here or other places I've lived, and I've always cleaned the sidewalk. I mean, it's something I do.
Yeah.
But I would think it almost creates more of a hazard not to clean it. You know, especially when it thaws and freezes, and you have, you know, just a real mess. But I really don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't. Because quite frankly, if it's a public sidewalk, it's a city sidewalk. It's not a private homeowner's sidewalk. And a lot of times you're cleaning it just to maintain, you know, your area in which you live.
Sure, you just automatically
do it.
Do you have any outstanding memories that you want to share with us about somebody who's really a jerk?
Funny one.
Oh, well, let me think.
I'm sure you've run into some unusual places where
Maybe
the guy just
shake your head. Huh?
you shake your head and say, "Well, what can I do?"
Yeah, I've had those circumstances over the years. I think the one that stands out, it didn't occur here. It occurred up in Lincolnwood when I was working there, and it was I don't know what nationality they were. I do know they were gypsies, and what their business was to buy homes, do a quick fix, and sell them. Well, in this circumstance, they bought this house, didn't get a permit for any work, started doing all this work, closed it all up, and tried selling it. And then we discovered some of the issues, and we said, no, you're going to have to take all these walls down. And these people just yelled and screamed and came in, and the woman's literally cursing at me, and she's basically going to put a gypsy curse on me and everything else. Maybe that's where my hair went. I really begin to wonder. But it took us to go all the way to court and to get this, and a $20,000 fine. They almost got arrested. They got removed from the home, and the judge just would not budge on them. And these people, there were 42 plumbing violations in that home, in one 2-story house. And that tells you what they were doing. They were just doing what they could as quickly as they could
to get in and get out.
To get in and get out and sell this house. And they would have made probably $150,000 to $200,000 profit on that house for what they bought it. So this is what their game was. And I've dealt with some difficult people over the years, but that was probably one that stands out in my mind of being the most difficult. And I think one other one that I had that was kind of comical. These two neighbors, for whatever reasons, something developed between the two of them. They didn't like one another, and this woman would she would hang her clothes out in the line, and this offended him, and then she was hanging her underwear on the back line, and he calls my office to complain about it. He says, is there an ordinance against this? And I go, what's the problem? Are they the wrong color or the size? I mean, I just couldn't quite figure out. And he didn't take very kindly to my comments. But, I mean, it was like, to me, that was, I mean, you know, when you're going to call me to complain about something, make it something substantial. Not complaining about what your neighbor is hanging on her clothesline. But, I mean, and these two people on weekends, one of them would bring boulders in and put down the side of the driveway because they didn't want them crossing over. Oh, boy. And I'd get a call on Monday morning from the other neighbor saying, what are you going to do about this guy who's put all these boulders along my driveway? So
I suppose it's easy for people to think, well, I'll just haul him into this, and you didn't even have a dog in there.
I'm usually stuck in the middle on a lot of it. Oh, yeah. I get pulled in, and, you know, it's like you got to sort it all out. You don't know which side you're going to, you know, is telling the most truth. That's what it boils down to.
There's 3 sides to everything. Your side, my side, and the truth. That's the one that's hard to find.
That's usually the hardest one.
Well, Bill, let's declare a truce then so John doesn't get involved.
I'm not going to complain about your damned underwear hanging on. John, before clock's about to run out on us here, touch on the economy here. Building permits, that kind of a bellwether on economy and what we're doing. Are we having some about same run, or are we having?
We're lower. We're lower this year. I'd say we're right now about 30% lower than we have been in the past. Oh. Yeah, there hasn't been as much activity. Some of it is due to the weather. I think some of it, you know, the projects have gotten pushed off. We're starting to see an increase in some decks and some of the other things now that we didn't see. But overall, we have had a decline this year in permits in the numbers. So, but we, you know, some of it just fluctuates with the years and with the weather and the economy. We did have a downturn in that after 2008, and it didn't really pick up until about 2 years ago.
Well, John, we appreciate your driving up here this morning. It's always nice to you know, every city has to have rules and regulations.
Well, yeah.
And that's the way nature is. We just have to conform. we appreciate the fact you've taken the time to share some of these things with us. You have a tough job, and I know that you run into all kinds of personalities. So looks to me like Judy, like he's pretty well set to handle any kind of personality in that job. I found a closing quote by Plato.
Oh.
Now, that's not the Plato you know. This is the real Plato. You're thinking of Plato from Burton View.
Oh,
Plato said, and I think this really kind of homes in, that the city is what it is because our citizens are what they are. Thank you, John Lebegue.
You're very welcome.
What you say?